Hi Year 13, so welcome to this little video series. I'm going to be going through paper 1 for the IB, the unseen paper. The focus of this video in particular, because it's what we've been covering in class, is the prose text. So how do we actually approach analysing an unseen prose text in the IB exam? Just before we go into detail with that, just want to have a little look of what paper 1 actually requires. Now we should know this anyway, so this is just having a brief, brief revisit of paper 1 and its requirements. Due to the pandemic this year, with the summer examinations in 2021, the weighting of this is not going to be 35%. It's changed. As far as we know at this point, and the HL assessment for paper 1 would normally take 2 hours and 15 minutes. So what you will get on this paper is 2 previously unseen literary passages, which you'll have to write a guided analysis to both. Now the guided analysis in this context, it refers to an exploration of the passage supported by a guiding question. Now you don't always actually have to follow the guiding question, but it's definitely worthwhile in the exam at least acknowledging what that is, because often under those conditions it can be quite overwhelming, so it's a good starting point for you. It might just get you started in the exam itself. Now don't forget that we're not sure what form you're actually going to get, what literary form. It could be something from drama, so it could be a play, an extract from a play. It could be poetry. It could be a non-fiction, so maybe an excerpt from an essay. It could be an excerpt from a graphic novel, and it also could be prose, and that is the focus of this video. So each question will have 2 literary extracts to look at, and each one of those is worth 20 marks in terms of your response. So the paper itself is worth 40 marks. For each question, criterion A, B, C and D will be assessed. And it's nice in a sense because it's clearly broken down into your 5 marks for each one, so they're all as important as one another. However, I do think, and I do tend to say, that the analysis and evaluation and the focus and organisation are the 2 that can be quite difficult under those timed conditions with an unseen piece. So that's what I'm going to try to help you with, focusing on how you approach it in that regard. Before we do that, I would recommend that you just pause the video for about 10 minutes, head to our Teams channel now and open up the marking criteria for paper 1. So this is obviously for students in my class. If you are watching from another class and you're not on my Teams channel, all you really need is the marking criteria from the IB for paper 1, which I'm sure your teachers have given you access to. So the task for the next 10 minutes is to just look through that marking criteria and make some annotations in your class notes as to how you can achieve the highest marks for each criterion. What is the skill set for each criterion that you need to be pushing, 4 out of 5, for example. So I want you to go and do that for 10 minutes and then unpause and continue on with the video. So how do we approach the unseen in terms of prose? What I've done is I've broken it down into specific steps that you can take in the exam. Now, but this is very, very skills based. And so it's good in that respect for your revision, that if you revise the steps that you need to take, it will probably keep you calm in the exam as well in terms of how to approach it. So what we've suggested and covered so far in our novel study, looking at prose, it's obviously a given that we've just got to analyse language and structure within a piece, along with the form and the genre. But what should we be considering? How do we get to that point? So the first thing that I would recommend that you do is just obviously read it and just figure out what's actually happening, what's going on within the extract that you're given. This might seem quite basic, but it is really important because your basic understanding of the piece is important to identify the rest. For you to access those higher level skills and end up evaluating the piece overall, you need to obviously be able to understand what is happening. So just think of this process as building blocks, and this is the first one. You're just simply reading it when you first get in there, and you're figuring out what is actually happening. Once you've done that, what you can then do is move on to the form. Now, don't forget, form in the context of paper 1 can mean the type of literature. So is the form of the literature poetry? Is it non-fiction? Is it from a graphic novel? Is it prose? But because we know we're already looking at prose, what I'm talking about here in terms of form is looking at the genre. So is there anything about the prose extract that you have been given, or that you will be given in the exam, that stands out to you? In a sense, that means you can identify the genre. So for example, is it gothic? Is it a thriller? Is it dystopian? And so on and so forth. A good way to do this, to prepare for this for your exam, is actually to revise the features of some of these genres, because that will then mean you can identify them better in the exam. Once you've done that, it's going to be easier to identify the themes. Once you know what's happening, once you know, okay, for example, this is gothic, you'll be able to then identify themes a lot easier. And that should be the next thing that you start to do. Only once you've done that should you start to get technical. Now, you can then start to look at the structure. So how is the piece structured overall? What do the paragraphs look like? Are some shorter than others? Are some longer than others? What might that mean? What are the sentence structures like? Do we have excessive listing? Do we have simplistic sentences? Do we have imperatives, declaratives? What is the point of that? Why are they structured in that way? And how do these link in with the meaning overall, and possibly the themes? You cannot obtain the highest marks if you don't consider structure. Now, I do think that most candidates tend to lean toward language, because it's just the easier one, it's the one that we're most comfortable with, and structure feels a little bit more technical. But do make it a part of your revision to really be focusing on the terminology of structure and what certain structural features are as well, okay? Then moving on to narrative perspective, voice and characterization. Now, narrative perspective can also come in the guise of structure, in the sense that if you get a retrospective narrative, if you have a spiral narrative, like a lot of Gothics have a spiral narrative, you might get an extract where part of the plot is unveiled in letters, and that would be a spiral narrative, for example. So that can be a case where it comes under structure, but don't worry about that too much for now. So once you've done the structural features, start to look at the narrative perspective, the voice and the characterization. Is this piece that is the piece that you're given in first or third person? What does that do in terms of delivering the overall message? Because by this point of approaching the prose piece, you should be getting an idea, you know, as to what this message is, what the message is that's coming out of it. How are the characters characterized? Is it explicit? Is it implicit? And what message does that deliver? What you should then start to be doing, and I haven't put language on here because I think naturally, once you get into the narrative perspective, voice and characterization, you will start to, and looking at the themes, you will start to be picking on language too. So by this point, what you should start to be thinking once you've gone through these steps is, what is the overall message of the piece? What is this extract telling us? What message is the author delivering within this piece? Is it effective? Don't forget that your evaluative statements are going to boost your marks. It shows a personal engagement. So always make sure that you are engaging when you do get around to responding to it. Make sure that you are engaging on a personal level and thinking, okay, is this author effective in delivering this message? Am I responding as the reader in the way that I think the author would want me to? So it is a process of going through and engaging and feeling the piece itself overall. So what I'm going to do now is I've selected an extract based on from a text. It's quite a well-known text. You might know the extract, but I've just taken one paragraph from the extract, and I'm going to go through step by step in colour coding. So I'm going to break down what's happening, what's the form, what are the themes, structural features, narrative perspective, and then I'm going to do a different approach, just talk through what the message of the piece might be overall. Okay. So this is paragraph 2 of an overall extract that I've picked out. Now, the reason I've just picked one paragraph is because I want to show initially that you can pull a lot of meaning even just from, you can do all of those steps even just within one small paragraph, okay? So the hallway smelt of boiled cabbage and old rag mats. At one end of it, a coloured poster, too large for indoor display, had been tacked to the wall. It depicted simply an enormous face more than a metre wide. The face of a man about 45 with heavy black moustache and ruggedly handsome features. Winston made for the stairs. It was no use trying the lift. Even at the best of times, it was seldom working, and at present the electric current was cut off during the daylight hours. It was part of the economy drive in preparation for Hate Week. The flat was 7 flights up, and Winston, who was 39 and had a varicose ulcer above his right ankle, went slowly, resting several times on the way. On each landing opposite the lift shaft, the poster with the enormous face gazed down from the wall. It was one of those pictures which are so contrived that the eyes follow you about when you move. Big Brother is watching you, the caption beneath it ran. Now, some of you can probably guess from Big Brother is watching you what text this is from. Guessing the text is not really the point. I have picked a well-known text for a reason, but what I want to do is now start to go through those steps that I talked you through before about how you can approach the unseen. So, first off, what we're wanting to do is simply figure out what's going on. So what is going on in this paragraph, because this is our sort of just comprehension, deciphering the plot of a piece. So quite simply, I've highlighted all of the bits that tell me what is going on. So really simply put, in this paragraph from the extract, we find out that the protagonist, Winston, seems to be returning home, and he's making his way through his building to his apartment, which is in a very run-down building. So straight away, that's what's happening. Done. And you can identify that with a couple of sentences. Pretty easy. Then we can step it up a little bit. So the hallway smelt of boiled cabbage and old rag mats. Even at the best of times, it was seldom working, and at present the electric current was cut off during daylight hours. Big Brother is watching you, the caption beneath it ran. So I've highlighted this because these sentences show that the conditions of the building, there's poverty, and there's constant surveillance within the extract. This indicates that this matches some of the features of the dystopian genre. I can see straight away, okay, poverty, surveillance, control, these types of things, they are features of what I would expect to find in a dystopian text. Part of your revision, just as a little revision tip, is that it would be worthwhile to research and revise specific features of certain genres, as this is going to help you identify them in the examination. Some are easier than others. Dystopian is pretty easy, Gothic is pretty easy, a Bildungsroman might be a little bit more difficult. So I can do another video for that, but definitely to get yourself started, even with the easier ones, I would suggest creating a little revision folder with the features of some of the different genres, because it's going to help you identify in the exam if you get PROSE. So then we can move on to themes. We've identified what's going on. We've identified that the genre is a dystopian. So now we can start to look at themes. Once you know the genre, the themes are much easier to spot because they're always going to be tied in with that genre itself. So if we just, I'm not going to read everything that I've highlighted, but if we just have a look at what I have highlighted, I'm going to give you a little minute to just have a look at that. And I would suggest, you can highlight in similar ways in the exam if it helps you to colour code the text, what steps you're taking, you can also do that. So if we look at this one, the one that I've just put the arrow coming off, the sentence starts with the flat was 7 flights up. This has given us a theme of individual suffering and pain. Yeah. Clearly the protagonist is suffering on an individual level due to his health. Then we've got a strong theme of poverty. So the hallway smelt of boiled cabbage and old rag mats. Then we have that there's no electricity. The electric current was cut off during daylight hours. And it was part of an economy drive. So we therefore can see a theme of poverty. Again, these themes are quite generic in terms of the genre of dystopia. We would expect to see these themes. And then the final one, it was one of those pictures which are so contrived. We start to get another theme of totalitarianism and control. Now, this is all just from the same paragraph. you're going to get a larger extract than this, but this is all from the same paragraph, and the reason I'm showing you this is to show you that you can draw so much out just based on a relatively small amount. So moving on, okay, I want you to just look at what I've highlighted here and why I might have done this. So this is where we're starting to look at structural features. Now, what I want to reiterate is that you're not going to have to analyse structure in every single line. You simply won't have the time to do that, and sometimes it's just not there. You know, sometimes it's just not going to be there. So what you need to do is find them where you can. Yeah. So in this paragraph, they're quite simplistic, really. They're not particularly highbrow in terms of terminology. But if we look at this, we've got the hallway smelled of boiled cabbage and old rag mats. Winston made for the stairs. It was no use trying the lift. And then the final one, it was part of the economy drive in preparation for Hate Week. So here we've just got the simple declarative sentences, and these are utilised when conveying information regarding the extreme poverty and negligence that Winston lives in. So this is significant because the structural choice here can be viewed as reflective of the forced acceptance of the conditions that citizens such as Winston lives through. Now this can now be linked back to our themes that we've just done in the previous step of totalitarianism and control. And through these use of declaratives, Winston's actions appear quite robotic. He seems just he's accepted his lot. This is just the way life is. As I say, a declarative sentence is not using that terminology is not necessarily the highest level of terminology that you can use, but what you are doing is identifying sentence structure, even when it is simplistic, and you're linking it back to the theme and the genre that we've just done in the previous steps. So by breaking it down in this way, it's much easier for you to do that. And this is just to reiterate again, you're not going to have time to analyse every single sentence within the extract you're given in the exam. So just select meaningful ones. Just select and retrieve relevant information. So just ones that you think link in with the themes, link in with potentially the message overall. For some reason, guys, the animation stopped working there, so I've just had to move something onto a different slide. So what I want to do is just talking about structure and simplistic structure. I just want to look at this is the first paragraph of the extract. So I've only shown you the second paragraph so far, but this is the first paragraph of the extract overall, which I do intend for you to look at in its entirety. I've highlighted green for structure in this part, beginning Winston Smith and ending along with him. Now, what we have is we have asyndetic structure used within the opening paragraph of the extract. Asyndetic is a little bit, of a higher level skill in terms of sentence structure. It's one that you should be quite used to using now and being able to identify. And don't forget, we've always got to attach meaning to that. So the asyndetic structure here is used within the opening paragraph. But this use of asyndetic is effectively applied by Orwell to symbolise the relentless onslaught of the conditions that Winston lives in. And this can once again be tied to the themes of control, totalitarianism and poverty. And this is where, in a snapshot, very, very quickly, you can start to bring all of these themes together. It will be far too overwhelming to not break it down into these steps. So if you follow in these steps, you'll get more comfortable at each stage making the annotations before you even start your response. So a little tip here is don't forget your terminology is important. You do need to be referencing for your analysis and evaluation authorial choices. It's really, really important. It's simply not enough to say a simple sentence. It's just not enough, not for HLIB. So do try to apply higher level terms. When you can't think of them, and like I said, even terms such as a declarative, that's not extremely high level, but you can create a sophisticated argument if you link that structural device in with the other steps that you followed. So if you know the themes, if you know the genre, if you can start to relate it back to those things, even if you're not using the highest level of terminology, you can still create a sophisticated argument and evaluative statements about the effectiveness of structure. So do bear that in mind. So this one, we're going to move on to the narrative, narrative perspective and characterization. So the fact we've got Winston, we can see that this is a third person perspective. What you should always be thinking to yourself once you get to this stage is, okay, well, why is this important? It's third person perspective, but so what? Why is it significant? Then you can start to build an argument even in your annotations, and it removes Winston's freedom of speech and the use of the personal pronoun I. So everything that we learn about him in this paragraph, for example, is from a distance. We don't learn much at all, but it's from a distance. And this is again reflective of the themes of dystopia that are running, of the dystopian genre that are running through the extract. Then we get some explicit information about Winston's age and illness, and this enables us as the reader to understand that he is struggling with very little help. The fact we're explicitly told that he's 39 is important, because he's not acting like a 39-year-old. He's acting much older because his health is not the best. So that's an important piece of information. And then have a little look at this. So just if you to have a little look at what I have highlighted here. So again, I have highlighted the same part as I did for structure with the asyndetic listing. He's got his chin nuzzled into his breast in an effort to escape the vile wind, slip quickly through the glass doors, and though not quickly enough to present a swirl of gritty dust from entering along with him. Winston went slowly, resting several times on the way. So we've got some implicit characterization going on here. We are having to decipher how he feels through his actions. We're not being explicitly told. So we're getting a deeper understanding of his character. He doesn't seem to complain. We witness him struggling with his health. He's walking slowly. He's resting. He tries to escape the vile winds. And it's actually significant that he's got no dialogue at all here, because we can link that back to one of the themes. We can link that back to the genre. And it simply means that we can't see him complaining. We just see him simply enduring. And so I've said, why is this important? Well, that's important because of the genre, because of the themes. And you will start to see now how you can build all of these things into building a solid argument, a solid exploration of the piece. And do bear in mind, this is just one paragraph of the piece. It's not the whole entire thing. But following these steps is going to help you to identify those things with whatever extract that you get. So what is the overall message of this piece, of this extract? Based on what we've gone through, based on the steps we followed, what do you think Orwell is actually trying to say? I think by now everyone knows it's 1984, by the way. But what's Orwell trying to say? What is the message that's being delivered here? I would say that it is that totalitarianism and authoritarian governments and constant surveillance and constant control is very, very damaging on the individual. I would say that's what his message is, just based on this paragraph alone. So what you need to start doing is thinking, well, that's probably the message he's trying to get across. And if I have guessed that, then is it effective? Well, yeah, it is effective. And it's effective because he uses all of the things that we've already gone through in the previous slides to develop this argument. What I haven't gone into here is language and, linguistic features. But I will be doing another video about how we can analyse those things. I think most people are quite comfortable with language. I wanted to go through those steps. So what I would recommend is, for those in my class, I'm going to give you an extract that you're going to work through following those steps, annotating under timed conditions so that you've got these ideas before you even start a response. The time you spend reading and annotating the unseen piece before you put any form of pen to paper, before you type anything, is really, really important. If you don't break it down into steps, it's going to be so overwhelming. So it's good to revise those steps to make sure that you're calm, you're collected, and you're prepared, and you can come up with a coherent argument. Thanks for watching.